Welcome to the Be a Human in Business show with your hosts, Tracy Borison, founder and personal branding coach at TLB Coaching and Events, Tara Argo, founder and relationship strategist at Argo Operations, Tawana Taylor, founder and project management consultant at Bootstrap Dreams, Debbie Aquara, founder and principal consultant at Niche Customer Experience Consulting Firm. Let's start the show.
Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Be a Human in Business show. We're really excited today to talk to you guys about, well, we were looking at it from a perspective of introductions, but I think we're probably going to go a little bit deeper than just introductions today. And we want to look at the concept of what you do versus who you are. And specifically when we are introduced to new people, a lot of times our default response, especially people who have been in business for a while, our default response is to talk about what we do as like business wise. And maybe that's because we think that that's the biggest value that we bring, or maybe it's because we haven't had a space to be able to share some of the deeper, more personal parts about ourselves in the past. But we're going to talk about the concept today and how we can hopefully bring more of who we are into that concept of introducing ourselves to other people and not just keeping us in the box of what we do. So does anybody want to kick us off in this conversation? Tawana, I know you did a post on Instagram a couple of weeks back about this concept.
Yeah, so, and I don't remember what triggered it. I really don't remember what triggered it. The question was, when introducing yourself, do you tell who you are or what you do, like you just articulated? And I find often, we're conditioned, right? Before each of us have the privilege and we made the autonomy to be full-time entrepreneurs, but we're conditioned before we become entrepreneurs often, and we're in the working world, whatever avenue that may be, to talk about our title, right? To talk about what we do, not even play from a place of service even. It's like, I am, right? So if I were thinking from the work introduction, I'm Tawana, principal consultant of Bootstrap Dreams, right? Knowing better, right? Moving forward in life and knowing better, it's like, what the freak does that even mean? Right? Depending on who you're talking to, depending on where you are at the moment, like at a baby shower, that would mean absolutely nothing. Nothing, unless I happen to be conversing with someone else who is within the consulting industry. And even then there are nuances that will say, well, what kind of consultant, right? And what do you do as a consultant? Who do you serve? Right? And some people are like, well, yeah, that's the conversation. And it can be. We're not saying right or wrong. We're just saying that what we do in our profession is only a portion of our living. And we can often find a greater common ground when we speak to who we are as a person. So like Tara, we know you often ask, if not always ask, right? Trying to stay away from explicatives, but I can't remember a time where I haven't heard you ask a person you're meeting, where are they from? Share with us that question and what that question means for you.
So the reason I ask that is because I'm always looking for commonalities with people to immediately build trust, right? So when I say, where are you from? That's where are you currently living? Where are you from? So that we can find some sort of a common denominator. It also breaks down some barriers for people because it allows them to share like, oh, I live in Atlanta. Oh, I'm Canadian and I live in Canada. It really allows people. And at that point, when I met Tracy, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to go to Banff. How far do you live from Banff? And, of course we wouldn't have known, that she's an hour from there. And then in Atlanta, it was kind of the same with you, Tawana. Like there's always something that you can relate back to. And it doesn't matter where people are in the world. And so that's always been a question that I liked because it was an easy question for people to answer. They didn't have to think. And it was something that they could just honestly open and share. And something that I want to say that you touched on just a second ago is about conditioning. I think we are very much conditioned to speak to what we do versus who we are. And you're absolutely right. You're much much more going to find commonalities in discussing who you are as a person versus what you do. And so when I met a lady one time, and I was telling you guys this story a little while ago, that she told me, she said, I quit asking people who they like, what they did, you know, and I started asking them, what do you like to do for fun? Or what are your passions? And that drew so much more relationship building, connection, all of that, because you were genuinely interested in the person and not just what they do. So, but that's the reason that I really ask that question, is because I've always, in all the years that I've ever, you know, done any sort of networking or connecting with people, that's just been a really easy and fun question for them to be able to answer, you know?
I think that's a really great point too, Tara, but the ease of answering a question. And there's definitely two dimensions here, right? Because you can't know how someone else is going to interpret a question. And so you might think that it's an easy question, but for them, there's the whole amount of complexity behind the scenes that you don't know. Exactly. And so we don't really know, but often those commonalities are in those things that are tiny and are easy to share, and are things that often don't cause judgment, right? So I think there are things, and I know even myself, like there have been things that people ask me where you're like, what are you looking for out of this answer, right? How are you using this information?
Age questions, that always comes to mind for me, Tracy, right? Like when people say, well, how old are you?
Why do you need to know that? What value does that add in our relationship, knowing how old I am?
Not that I'm ashamed,
Exactly.
not that I wouldn't share, but my immediate thought is,
that's an odd question.
Right?
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. What does that have to do with
anything? But so the examples I'm thinking of are like coffee versus tea, right? Mm-hmm. So like I myself don't drink coffee, and it's been so weird because the people I meet who are also tea drinkers, all of a sudden we have something to talk about, and it's not a complex part of my personality. I have a funny story about why I don't drink coffee, right? So I can share that with people who like coffee. But those things are who I am. It's not what I do, right? Like I love Star Wars. When I met another person the other day on a coffee chat who was just referenced one of my Yoda posts and then went off on this whole tangent about Star Wars. And I was like, now we have something in common, and it has nothing to do with what I do, right? It has everything to do with who I am. And so it's kind of a weird concept. And I mean, I work a lot in the personal branding arena, so this is what I work on with a lot of people. But I can build a relationship with someone faster if they're a tea drinker than if they need a personal branding coach, right? Because like often, and I think like for us here anyway, because we're all consultants of one form or another, but like, I don't know, a lot of times people don't know they need me until they need me, right? But I can have a relationship with a human based on more than that. I actually had a coffee chat. This was a while ago now, but I was trying so hard to get something out of this lady that was not work related. Because like what she did for work wasn't relevant to me. It's not something that I need. It's not a problem I've ever had. It's not a problem I know a lot of people having. Like it was a different kind of age category and demographic thing. And so like, I still want to, I'm sure there's something about you that we can build a relationship on, but it just was like, kept going back and going back and going back to work. And I do think like it really is nothing more than that conditioning, right? Like the question I like to ask is, tell me about yourself. Because I think it gives you an opening to tell me what you want me to know, right? Like you don't have to tell me anything in particular, just tell me something. And then often wherever you start, we can have a conversation and we can go from there. But 95% of the time, the first thing people tell me is what they do. Or heaven forbid, their I help statement, which I don't need to go on a tangent about today, but it's just like, for one, you don't know that I'm that, right? Like, so if you knew I was your target audience, then maybe it makes sense for you to share that with me, but like, you don't know enough about me to know that. It's just a default response. So any default responses we have an opportunity to create a different default response in the future. So I would love to hear your guys' opinion on what are some of the things that you've maybe shared in the past, or some of the things you've seen other people share, more on the who you are versus what you do, that we can help our viewers break down this habit they might have of just by default responding with what they do.
Yeah, I for me, the term psychological safety comes up, and we briefed that a little bit before we started this segment for this episode. Along with the conditioning and those default responses, I love that you said we have the opportunity to create a new response, because we genuinely do. We have to feel that we have to feel and know that it's okay to do so, right? And so sometimes people have default responses and they don't even know they have a default response, right? Because it's so programmed. It's so programmed that when I open my mouth to speak, this is what I say. This is the proper response. And it's up to people like us and those of you watching to encourage and invite further conversation, to encourage them to share more about them, the person. And so I don't per se, and this might be a networking faux pas, I don't have a set question that I ask. It depends on the setting that I'm in. Right? So if as a woman, if I'm in a location where many other children are present, naturally the conversation of kids come up. Right? And so I don't assume, though, that the woman there is a mother, because they may not be. They could be babysitting. They could be an auntie. They can be just there keeping company. I've had many of my single girlfriends meet me at an indoor play zone simply because that was the best way we could talk. Right? While my daughter goes and plays. Right? And so it depends on the setting for me. Yet, like Tracy said, asking, well, how about you? Right? Tell me something interesting about you. That's even something that I have in my LinkedIn whenever I respond to a new connection. Point me to something interesting about you. You're the decider of that, right? Not me. I can decide what's interesting after you tell me, but I'm not going to judge what I think is interesting when we're introducing one another. So creating that space, I think it's up to people like us to continue to cultivate that space, that you're okay to be you, because there's so many spaces in life that have said for a long, long time, it's not okay to be you, right? It's okay to be everything but you, actually. And so people hide behind what they do, because that has been received as more proper, as more appropriate, as more category specific, or as more comfortable for others. And I say, to heck with it, and share more about you, the person, and walk away comfortable with it. If it's a match, great. If it's not a match, that's okay. Maybe they're a match for somebody else that you know. Maybe they're a match for somebody else that you may meet in a future point in time to come. Yet what we do truly is only a portion of the lives that we lived. And while sometimes it seems like a really big portion, because we spend a lot more time working often, or doing something work related than we do leisure, yet don't feel like your professional person and your personal person, your personal being, are isolated, because they are not all that isolated. They complement one another, and very well.
Yes. And two important things that I wanted to comment on there. One of this thing is just like hovering over my head in terms of like, tell me something interesting about yourself. And the response being like, there is nothing interesting about me. Mm-hmm. Because this is something that I see often too, especially for people. And I'll be honest, I see this more in men, and many of the limitations that we have as women in business, there's also been this persona of men in business. And if you were not that naturally, then you have been working very hard to be that for a very long time. And so I find that it's actually quite difficult for men who've been in business for a while to find that there's anything interesting about themselves. And I am a big believer. So if anybody's watching this and they don't believe that there is anything interesting, if you don't believe there's something interesting about you, please come talk to me. We'll find it in 20 minutes. There's something. There's always something, because as a human, we don't exist as one-dimensional beings. And we just don't exist that way. And if you're saying that the only thing relevant for anyone to know is what you do for a job, then you forgot about all the reasons. Like, think about the friends you have. Why do you have those friends, right? You like hockey, or you like, I remember actually once a coworker of mine came back from a trade show, and it was like mostly insurance people, and they were all talking about this TV show 90 Day Fiance, which I'm not sure is a thing anymore. But like everybody was just like bonding over this ridiculous TV show, and that builds relationships with people. They could have follow-up conversations about that show, or did you see that episode, right? Like, these are, I think a lot of times people by default see those things as not interesting. But like, I will tell you guys one thing: if the only thing someone wanted to tell me was that they liked the TV show Bones, I would be like, I watched that all through the night when I was breastfeeding, right? And like immediately we would have something in common. So I just want to encourage everybody listening to remember that when someone like Tawana asks you something interesting about yourself, they are asking about you, about the things you like. And it's, if we are the ones who are, if we're deciding that there's nothing interesting about ourselves, we're cutting ourselves off from opportunities to connect with people. And so I had to say that, because I know, like, I just come across it so many times that people are just like, well, there's nothing interesting about me.
Yeah.
There is something interesting about you. And will everybody find it interesting? No. But there are people who have those same interests, who will find it interesting. And quite often it's just a conversation starter, right? So it gives you an opening to go somewhere, instead of like, oh, there's nothing interesting about me. That's a conversation closer. Yes. That's just saying like, nope, I don't want to participate in this conversation. And so, like, there's nothing stopping you. There's nothing stopping you from talking about what you do, right? Like, especially if you love what you do, right? If you are a life coach, or I don't know, a basketball coach, and you love that, right? Like, if you sell ice cream because you love ice cream and you want to talk about that, that's fine. We're not here to tell you, never tell people what you do. Because also as entrepreneurs, you can't make any sales. You never tell anybody what it is that you do. So it's just the concept of that there's more than that.
More than that.
And yeah, and just remember that.
Why, right?
Yeah.
Like, why? Tell the why you do what you do. That will often even lead to a greater conversation for you to explore whether or not the person is a cool person to meet, great person to collaborate with, or a potential client of what you're offering. Heck, you may need to be a client of what they're offering even, right? To talk about the why, not just the what, so that you can get to the points of where it makes sense to share more in depth about business, right? Yeah, that was really good, Tracy, because sometimes we forget that the why is really the root, the anchor, the sparkler behind the what that even needs to happen. You know, I don't know. Again, it goes back to that conditioning, being in big corporate settings and kind of being taught to separate, you know, who you are as an individual from your business brand. And there comes a point in time where your business gets big enough where maybe that does happen. Yet when it's you, and primarily you, who you are and what you do, right? They're not isolated. They're not one-dimensional, as Tracy expressed. So when Tara asks, well, where are you from? You know what? Your response doesn't have to be a location. Your response can be, I come from a place where I was silenced. Ooh, what kind of conversation could that open up, right? It doesn't talk about your geographic location at all. It may lead to that, right? But you have opened the door for people to lean in and say, now how'd that happen? Right? Tell me more about, I need to know more about this person that has been silenced. Why? What happened? And then when? And where did you go from there? And wow, I know a person that also has been silenced. I myself maybe once upon a time had been silenced. And you find that common ground that Tracy has talked so sincerely about. So
well,
go Tara.
And I'm gonna piggyback off of all of this, because when I go into any conversation, I am there to find my common ground with that person. And quite frankly, if I don't have a deep connection with someone or a connection of some sort, I'm likely not going to have a relationship with them, whether that be business, collaborative, as a friend. So I need to, as a human, I need to feel a connection to them. I'm not there for superficialness, never. And I'm always asking a lot of questions. And so it is important to be intuitive. It is important to say, oh, wow, well, you're from such and such, whatever. And did you know that, I went to this place very local to you? What did you think about that? And as you're pulling that information out of people, you get to ask more in-depth questions, right? Like the whys and the hows and all of that. But it has to be built on commonalities. It has to be built on those common denominators. And for me, I am looking for those, because that's the type of people that I want to either have as a friend, I want to have as a collaborative partner, referral partner, or potentially a client in the future, right? So I want them to know that I'm genuinely there to interact with them, that I'm interested in what they are doing. Half the time, I don't normally even talk about myself, because for me, it's more important for me to understand that person and where they're coming from. And so you guys really hit it on the head, because I think that it all does boil down to that conditioning and learning that, yes, we want to know what you do, but it more so is important to know who you are as a person and what got you to that point. And so some of the things that you can even think about when you're thinking about, I'm not unique, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. Well, for me, I always say, I'm a mother. I'm very into my faith. I'm very much a wife. I'm this, I'm that. I love nature. All of those things make up me, right? I love to drink coffee. I like to do puzzles. It's just the little things. And I'll tell you that we have several networking calls in the Your Business Peeps community. And every time there is something new that gets brought up that everyone on the call has in common. Last time it was like, oh, we're all corporate. We all came from corporate. One time, I don't even remember. One time there were several people that were potty training their kids. They didn't know each other were potty training. It's the little things that don't seem like they're real relevant that actually bring you closer to another human being. So I do encourage all of that very small talk, because you'll never believe it. But half the time, I mean, Tracy, you can tell some of those other things that we've talked about. And you too, Twana, we've been on calls and I'm like, I didn't know that we had that in common. Or, and it's usually the little bitty tiny things. So just talk as a human, connect as a human on a basic level, and then it flows from there. Sorry, I get really excited about all of these things.
We had that the other day when we were talking about our hair, and if we don't wash it, it gets so greasy and drives us crazy. And then like 3 of us on the call have the exact same problem. Wow, I didn't know this about us.
You can brainstorm, you can mastermind, you can come up with solutions and strategies because of your living, not just your home skilled and educational, gains. And if we can hinge in onto how getting to know the person will also help you do better business.
Correct.
Because from a hiring standpoint, right, for those of you who are in companies where you either are building your team or you're in a larger company and you are continuously seeking great talent and employees or contractors for this or that, listen, you do business with people, not just their CV or the resume they're submitting. And for those of you who are in bouts of hefty turnover, if you will, try a different strategy. Try asking some more behavioral questions so that you can get to know the person, some situational questions so that you can get to know the person and determine whether or not they are a fit, because anybody can give you a perfect pitch on what they do in business, right? But ask a graphic designer, can they design? And they say yes. Ask them for some samples of work and you might see something different, right? Ask them how would they respond to a certain type of situation, and you'll know whether or not you or your company culture aligns with them, whether it's personally you're meeting or professionally you're meeting. Talk about more than the doing. Talk about the being. Invite opportunity in to get to know a person. That's one of the things that has significantly made a huge difference in the success of the entrepreneurs that I work with our virtual assistant referral services, right? And the virtual professionals, when they get on the call, they're like, oh, wait, this isn't a standard interview? Nope, not at all. This is a meetup. Welcome, right? And I'm like, I've got your resume. I've seen your samples of work already. All that stuff is great and is transferable. Now tell me about you. Are you family oriented? Do you like nutrition? Is food a thing for you? Do you make stuff? Do you travel? How's COVID in your area, right? Like, how do you function? So that way, when I get to the entrepreneur and I say, hey, Tracy, I know you've been looking for a virtual assistant. And I also know you like tea, not coffee. I met a person that told me about mud water. Have you heard of that? Well, there's this professional that does this. And oh, by the way, she's super into your personal branding. So I think you guys need to meet, right? All of those things break down barriers and cause for a greater conversation, a more prolific opportunity, and a more proactive approach to doing life in community, because we are not meant to do it alone.
Watch our 2 episodes ago episode on that.
2 episodes ago, right?
Yeah, and Tawana, you just said something that sparked me too. You know, when I'm listening for all of those things in my conversations, that's actually how I connect people. Is because one person will say, I love coffee, and the next person, it's not coffee normally, but you know what I mean? Like, it's usually something unique. Maybe they're really involved in mental health and they really want to be that change maker in the mental health field. Well, guess what? I know about 5 people all across the world. And you know what? They all need to sit at the table and they need to come together to solve a problem. And it's obviously always better when you can have a group of people working toward a solution for something. But that's exactly the case for me when I go to connect as a connector. That's what I'm looking for. When I'm asking a lot of questions in my calls with people or when I'm meeting people, I'm doing it for that reason, because I'm looking for unique things to put them together with other people. Sorry, I got excited about that one too. When she said that, I was like, yes, that's something that people need to really think about.
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is a important note, is that when you're asking the questions, what is your intention? Right? So if I ask you the question, what do you do? And my intention is to find out what you do for a job. Okay. Why is that my intention? Right? Like, is it also just me as the question asker's default? Hey, I'm not really that interested in you, so I'll just ask you the default question, which is, what do you do? Right? Why are you having the conversation? Why are you starting a conversation? As an HR manager or an interviewer, what do you want to know? Right? Like, do you have, like Tawana said, you have their resume, right? Like, you know they can do specific tasks. You may call their references and all those types of things too. What do you want to know about this person? What do you know will make a person successful in your business? How can you ask them a question that will help them identify that they're going to be successful working here, like both of you, right? Like Tara said, her intention is to learn enough about a person to help them solve a problem. Maybe that's they need to meet another person. Maybe it's that they need something she provides. Maybe it's that they need to have a community with someone else, right? Like, I don't know what that is going into it, but I know I'm trying to learn a thing about you. And for me, I speak a lot about being memorable, right? In the personal branding space, it really is about you standing out and maybe people feel a way that you want to make them feel. So if you're going to ask someone a question, for whatever reason, in an interview, you're at a networking event, whatever, this is part of your personal brand. The way you ask the questions, the way you're trying to create this environment. We talked about like a psychological safety, right? Like I have the ability as the question asker to create that environment, to create an environment for people to feel comfortable, to reveal more about themselves than just their job. But I don't get to do that if the only question I ask in a nonchalant way is what you do. Right? So let's be better. Let's be better question askers.
Yes. And you know what? I'm on like this, feel like I'm solving a puzzle when I go into the conversation because I'm there to find out all these things and put all those pieces together to solve that problem. But it's almost like you get to go as a detective, and I get to learn so much about somebody and what they do and how they do it and why they do it and about them as a person. And so anyways, there's just so much goodness around this. And it's really fun to share other parts of you as well. As you do it, it becomes easier. So just think of those things and just start to share them each time.
This is so good. Well, as you all know, with each episode, we love to part with you with a closing summary of the conversation. Before we do that, though, we want to invite you to put in the comments, what are some of your introductory questions? There may be somebody watching that's like, I hate going in a room with people, whether it's on the Zoom or in a real room, because they're like, I don't even know how to ask. I don't know what to say. I'm not sure how to start a conversation, right? I don't know what my intentions are yet. I just know I need to be there. That was a huge step, right? So share with us some of the introductory questions that you ask or would like to ask going forward from today. And so we talked about what you do versus who you are and creating a safe space to share non-work related interesting things. You're the decider of that, right? You get to set the tone. You get to set the stage about what you lead with as your being. We have the autonomy to create new responses. Tracy said very, very intriguingly to me, right? We have a default response. We have the autonomy to create a new response. What will yours be? We don't exist as one-dimensional human beings. Our person and our professional are not isolated. That's often why we're so good at them, right? Build relationship with people. Invite opportunity to get to know a person. Be a conversation opener, not a conversation closer. Participate. Also, as the question asker, what are your intentions? And as the question answerer, what do you want people to know about you? What would you like to leave them with, right? And have the courage going forward, knowing that it's totally okay to be you.
Claps, claps, claps. Round of applause. It just is like everything I believe in. And so I thank you guys so much for this amazing conversation today. Before we wrap up, we need to send our little hearts out here to Miss Debbie, who's just wrapping up her amazing customer experience West Africa summit. So congratulations to Debbie for that, because that was a huge undertaking and was a wonderful, wonderful event. So congratulations, Debbie. And we're looking forward to having Debbie back with us sometime soon, hopefully in August. So stay tuned for that, everybody, because Debbie's going to come and drop gems, because this is what she does. And our episode titles will be much cleverer. Much better. Everybody has their contribution, right? We love you, Debbie. Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us today. We would really love for you to share in the comments any of those questions that you guys have or think you might want to try or tried and didn't work, or anything in that question asking arena, and we can work together to build these experiences that can create that safety for other people to reveal more of who they are. And until then, remember, be human.
Be a human.